to understand that we are all God's children. Hey, thank you very much.
Spirit of the Lord is here. Say it if you know it's true. I can feel.
And homophobia and the many other things that keep us separate and apart from one another, but more significantly separate and apart from the glory and the blessings of God that all of us can be. It is my distinct pleasure this morning to have the opportunity to introduce our speaker. Individuals who take on leadership, particularly stellar leadership like our speaker this morning, really have to be willing to put themselves on the line, who they are, who they could be, on the line for their cause. And this is something that our speaker, the Reverend Al Sharpton, has done over and over again. Whether it is in the streets or on the campaign trail, he has been open and willing to express both the politics and the spirit of inclusion, equality, and justice for all. And I know that you all will join me in welcoming this morning our keynote speaker, the Reverend Al Sharpton.
Thank you very much to all of you that have gathered, and to Alexander for that introduction. Certainly Reverend McDonald, who has been a long and prolific and outstanding leader in the civil rights and faith community. Give him a hand. I also see my friend and brother, Reverend Ken Samuel, in the back, who is a great pulpiteer here in the Georgia area. I'm very happy to be part of this summit and very happy to be here this morning. I got up about 4:30 in Dayton, Ohio, and Reverend McDonald, I got on the first plane, they canceled it. So I thought it was a conspiracy. I got on the second plane, then they told me the first plane was going. So then I got on the first plane, and they said that some had run into the cargo door or something, so they would only fly at 10,000 feet. I didn't know if that was good or bad. But anyway, I landed. So they asked me how was the flight. All I can say is it landed. Any flight that lands is a good flight to me. I wanted to be here today because I feel that the issue that we are dealing with is a very important issue for our community in terms of the African American community in general and the black church specifically. I also think that the activist or civil rights community also has to deal with this issue in a forthright manner. And I will give you briefly how I came to this personally and why I think it is important to all of us. I grew up in the aftermath of Dr. Martin Luther King. I joined the New York branch of SCLC the year he died. I was 12 years old. I became the youth director of Operation Breadbasket New York under Reverend Jackson at 13. A few years later, because of some differences in the organization, Reverend Jackson left, and therefore I left. And I decided to form my own youth group in New York. And I went to a man who gave me the money to start National Youth Movement named Bayard Rustin. And Bayard Rustin gave me the funds that started National Youth Movement and kept me going in civil rights. As I got to know Mr. Rustin, I got to know the history of how this ingenious and brilliant organizer and tactician had been with Dr. King as a chief strategist and his historic role even today. When I thought about the implications of that, I thought that it is in many ways against what we claim to believe in if we allow some latent or hidden bias of our own inhibit the maximizing of a liberation struggle. Because they could not have attempted this blackmail had they not depended, Keith Boykin, on the homophobia of those that were involved in the movement. If there had not been homophobia, it would not even have been an issue.
Same gender-loving people, when a church tries to withhold God's grace from them, there are words like sadness, disengagement, and loneliness, and hiding that come to mind immediately. Fear-based perception of all things church permeates our community and is particularly present for those who have a deep call and they feel they cannot respond to it. It's a prison to hear God call you clearly and not be able to live out the vision. It's like being forever pregnant and not being able to give birth. Powerful ministers, singers, prophets and preachers living in a wasteland of don't ask, don't tell. Particularly if they choose to stay connected in an atmosphere of homophobia and homo-hatred. And the fact that we don't tell, even when we're asked, doesn't change our reality. It just makes us compromise our integrity. We are a people who have done a lot of praying and a lot of crying and a lot of asking God, if you want it changed, take it away. And to get up in the morning and look in the mirror and be the same you that you were last night when you went to bed. And then the pretense becomes internalized as abuse of self manifests itself by believing that it is God's will that we subject ourselves to theological, emotional, and sometimes physical abuse. What harm is done to same-gender loving people when the church tries to withhold God's grace? And what about our families, our mothers, our fathers? I call them the parents of prophetic children. What about the mothers of sons who have died with AIDS? And what about the blood of those sons and daughters that cries up to us constantly from the ground? Those often set aside, and now their surviving parents are ostracized and judged by their peers as flawed and unfit parents. What did you do to make your son gay? Maybe you shouldn't have had him making sweet potato pie. Maybe he shouldn't have worked in the church kitchen. Maybe you should have kept him out the community choir. Something you did. Maybe y'all should have beat him more and got him some rough clothes and some, y'all understand, race cars and some. Maybe you should have done some things differently, and our mothers and fathers are suffering still horribly from the abuse of their peers. What is it? What is the damage that is done when the church withholds the grace of God from same-gender loving people? You find people now pretending to be straight just to survive in the church. You see, the phenomena of the black community, same-gender loving people don't leave the neighborhood.